Welcome to Life Planning 101, brought to you by Kennedy Financial Services of Eastland. Tune in every Monday morning at 8:30 on KATX and KWBY, and again on Saturday morning at 9 on KATX and KWBY as Angela Robinson joins Terry Slavens to share important financial information to help you live life on purpose. Insurance, investments, estate and tax planning, and much more. All covered now on Life Planning 101.
Good morning and welcome into Life Planning 101 right here on KATX and KWBY. Blakeney Hodges stepping in for Terry Slavens, and happy to do so. And always in great company this Monday morning, Angela Robinson and Aaron Kennedy.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Monday morning.
Monday morning. We have a wonderful show. I'm so looking forward to this because I don't know that many people actually know that we have an anniversary of the Great Recession. How many people celebrate that, of course, right?
Probably no one.
Probably not. I know. But it's actually June 13th, okay, marked the 10-year anniversary of the end of the Great Recession that ended on May 31st of 2009. And it not only is an anniversary, it broke a record as the longest standing economic expansion in U.S. history. So a lot of people are looking at that in a lot of different ways. And, you know, the ultimate question is, does that mean we're headed back for a recession? And how bad is it going to be? What's going to happen? Should I sell my investments? What should I do, right? And, you know, that is why we have Aaron here. Not myself alone, right? Because that is a big question, huge question. And it is on everybody's mind. And I mean, if you're an investor, if you've got your money invested, and really, I don't even think it matters where you are in the life cycle, but especially nearing retirement or in retirement, it's definitely going to be prevalent in your minds of what is going to happen. And, you know, in the words of Aaron Kennedy, our very own CFA, he always says, we will have a recession. It may be tomorrow. It may be in 10 years, but we will have a recession. And if you're around Aaron at all, you know his dry sense of humor, right? But recessions are inevitable. They're simply a part of that basic economic cycle that we have. And that's what we have him here to talk about is talk about that economic cycle. Where are we at in that economic cycle? What economics do investors need to be looking at? How should they be positioning their portfolio? And what is really the secret ingredient behind it all, which is going to be the very last thing on the show, and you definitely don't want to miss that. So, Aaron, thank you for being on the show today.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And, you know, it's a wonderful time in the markets until it's not. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about what you see as far as the economic cycle goes, and maybe go back to the basics, because a lot of people may not even really understand, you know, how it works.
Right. You know, if you look at an economic cycle, it looks like any other cycle out there. It's like a gigantic roller coaster. You know, we start at the bottom, which is our trough, and then we go through an expansion phase where the market continues to get higher and higher in value. The global economics or the U.S. economics continue to expand and grow, and then we get somewhere close to the top and we start to roll over. And then we enter into this contraction phase. And then we ride that contraction phase down to the bottom and hit our trough, which is the bottom, and then we go back up. And we do this over and over and over again. The hard part for us humans is we try to figure out where we are and how much time we have left. You know, our brains, that's how it works. Like Angela said, we are entering into the longest expansion period in our history. You know, so our human brains are saying we're getting close to the end. We're getting close to the end. This is it. But there's no time frame on anything. If we go look at Australia, guess how long they've been in an expansion phase? 28 years.
Wow.
Man.
28 years.
Wow.
So how long is 10?
Yeah, I was about to say 10 years is nothing. June 13th was nothing. So forget the cake.
Yeah. So, but as humans, we want to put everything in a pretty box with a pretty bow and say, this is a time frame that this should happen, and we're going to go with it. And that's exactly what's happening right now. And it's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful, because one of the big things I look at is a sentiment index, which shows the temperament of almost all the investors out there. And guess where they are? They're scared to death. That's wonderful.
Yeah, if Warren Buffett was in here, he would say, buy fear, buy fear, buy fear, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. You know, it's amazing to me, a lot of people say, well, they see these peaks and they say, I want out. And, if they're right, they win. They win big, right?
Yeah. Yes.
If things are going to go down. But if that market doesn't drop for 2 or 3 or more years, they lose big.
Yes.
Very big. And, we've seen that a few times. In fact, it's always amazing when we go back and look at portfolios of our clients, and we have a set few that it's a real struggle with them to help them stay disciplined. And you can look at those portfolios without a name on them, and you're like, what happened here? What happened to this? Why does this look like this? And it's because they tried to gamble with the market. Mm-hmm. They tried to time that market. Yes. And, really, they just need to be going to Vegas, because that's right. That's what it's all. That's really what it is. And, I don't know about you, but if it's my retirement money, if it's my entire future, that's not something I want to gamble with. That's not something I want to treat Vegas money with. So why do we do that?
Yeah, that comes down to human emotion, period. Mm-hmm. You think about all the economists out there. We're talking tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of economists. And one gets it right. One gets it right, and he makes the news. 1 out of 10,000, 1 out of 100,000, people don't know.
Yeah.
It's all a guess.
How slim the chances
are.
are.
So why guess? Especially if you're wrong, it will be devastating.
Right.
Either way.
You gave me a great segue, because I found this joke this morning. I was like, where do I throw this in? Because I love this. It says, how many central bank economists does it take to screw in a light bulb? Just one. He holds the light bulb, and the whole earth revolves around him. So true.
That is great.
That's a good one.
Yes. So if you don't want to gamble, and, we've said it many times over on the show, if you've been listening, right? Investing is about discipline, sticking to the fundamentals, and our experiences have taught us really to be comfortable with those disciplines. So we've got 3 thoughts that you're going to want to consider before you pull any triggers with your investment portfolio. You don't want to miss it right here on Life Planning 101 with our very own CFA Aaron Kennedy when we come back.
Welcome back into Life Planning 101 right here on KATX and KWBY. And we're talking about the market.
The market, right. The longest economic expansion in U.S. history. And should you be worried about your investments? And that's why we have our very own CFA Aaron Kennedy with us today to talk about this. And, I find it interesting. Warren Buffett, if anybody knows anything about investing, and by the way, if you don't know anything about Warren Buffett, then you probably don't need to be investing by yourself. You need to be probably getting help.
Talk about gamble.
Yes, exactly. So if you know who Warren Buffett is, he says risk comes from not knowing what you are doing. Pretty simple, right? And, so Aaron's sitting here like, yeah. So many times, we see people make decisions not knowing what they're really doing. And it's really no fault of theirs. It's just the emotional side of our brain that gets a hold of us. And so I think the first thing that we always look at is examining the economics, right? What is actually going on out there? And, Aaron, I'd like to know from you. You have this crazy list, and you just told me you could load my computer up with all of these indexes to look at on a regular basis. What are you looking at? Because there's this massive, ugly geopolitical environment that gets lambasted all over the news every day. Is that what you look at, or is it something else?
That's part of it. That's part of it. There's several things that we look at. Remind me to come back to the tariffs, but, just from an economic standpoint, we really like to look at what they call leading indicators, leading economic indicators. And that's what kind of shows what we see coming down the pipeline. So if you think, I think we have talked about this before, but the easiest one to think about is building permits. So if we see a building permit come down the road, we know a house is going to be built. We know construction workers are going to be put on that house. We know a new refrigerator is going to be bought. Mm-hmm. All these things come with that home build, and that's a leading economic indicator. Stock market is a leading economic indicator. We're looking at future earnings. So we look at a lot of these, and, there's really no magic bullet there either, because it just shows what's coming. Doesn't tell us when it's coming. A lot of these indicators can predict stuff out to 18 months down the road. So doesn't mean once all this stuff happens, bad things are going to happen. It just means it could be coming, and it's things to watch out for. And then once you see these, you don't want to sit in cash for 18 months, because usually the end of the expansion is when things get manic. People go crazy buying. And we see think of the late 90s where the market just goes straight through the roof. So if you're sitting out the end of that and you don't get any of it, that can be devastating.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this quote. It says, "How many millionaires do you know have become wealthy investing in their savings accounts?"
Yeah.
Right? doesn't happen, right?
Yeah.
Not getting there for sure. And I always think about what Dad, when he taught the seminars for years, he would tell people, when they retired, today's the first day of the rest of your life. And we have this stigma in our head that as soon as we retire, we need to get conservative. But if it's the first day of the rest of your life, you could spend more of your lifetime living than you would working, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
In your working career. And if you were successful, if investing was successful all those years that you were working, why would you ever want to stop doing what's made you successful? And it's just about how you do it. That's the key.
That's exactly right. How do you do it? This world has changed so much. I think the stigma was born out of a time in the 80s where you could drop your money into a treasury or something and get 12 to 13% or up to 18% on something that's safe. Those times are no more. We're getting less than, what was it, 2.8 or somewhere around that for a 10-year treasury.
Wow.
You can't live off of that.
Mm-mm.
No.
CD rates, you can't. They dropped below 2% Friday, so you can't live off of that.
No, especially when inflation's higher than that.
That's right.
Yeah.
How does that work, right? You're losing money.
You're losing money.
Going broke safely. So you talk about this leading economic index. What is that telling us right now?
Nothing's wrong. Nothing's wrong. We're still growing. LEI came out for May, and it was unchanged. We had 3 months of expansion, and we're still at that. When the number doesn't change, it just means that we didn't accelerate our growth.
Right.
So we're still growing. Our economy is still growing. The Chicago Fed National Activity Index was the same thing, flattened out. We're not close to a recession that we can see, and all these indexes have been almost 100% accurate in predicting things down the road, and it's showing right now we're okay.
Wow.
We're very okay.
So all this new sentiment, you said, get you back to tariffs. Well, let's get back to the negative side. If all that's saying positive,
Right.
What about this geopolitical environment that we hear about? Blakeney's scratching her head over there.
For the most part, you should absolutely ignore politics. Politics is not something to invest in. It will get you in trouble almost 100% of the time. There are some things that are going on now that affects markets, and this being the trade wars and the tariffs. Because we've gone so long having this globalization where we are taking our manufacturing and pushing it overseas to the cheaper producer. And we've been doing this for so long, and that is slowing down. So the input or the cost of our goods looks to be going up, which is an economic event. Doesn't mean there's a fear of this right now. Not that it's going to happen, but there is a fear that nothing will get resolved.
Yeah.
If it does, we're back to blowing and going. And it's hard to say whether, I do not believe Trump is trying to stop globalization. He wants to quit being taken advantage of because of globalization. So if that gets fixed, nothing's wrong. We just kind of even the playing field. And even if it doesn't, talk about China. Apple came out and said, hey, most of our manufacturing at Foxconn in China, maybe that's too much risk for us. Let's move it over to Vietnam, or let's move it to Malaysia, which, guess what? It's cheaper.
Yeah, I mean, if I was a CEO of a corporation and my prices were going up, my stockholders aren't going to be happy, and my employees aren't going to get their paycheck. So I'm going to make sure I go find something cheaper.
Hello, capitalism,
Right.
globalization.
Hello.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that's the way it should work. And they shouldn't have been. China is not the low cost producer anymore. So why are we there for so much of our manufacturing? And especially with the risk that we're taking over there.
So it's a small factoid in the whole picture.
Yes, very small.
It's everything we hear about, right?
Yeah.
If it's not Iran, it's a tariff, and it's not a tariff, it's Iran. So it's never about all these positive indexes that are going to magically show up on my computer in the future.
Right.
So
Yeah. Not any of those.
Never that.
never that. So that's great stuff. Examining the economics. When we come back, let's talk about a little bit more about how to position your portfolio for the times and then that secret sauce that you don't want to miss right here on Life Planning 101 with Aaron Kennedy.
Welcome back into Life Planning 101, final segment here today.
Aaron Kennedy, our CFA at Kennedy Financial Services and Smart Money Group, with us today. And, we talked about examining the economics, and that was some really good stuff. And if you missed those first two segments, I highly recommend you go back and listen to the show again. And, another piece to this is we wrote a special report. Here we are a decade out from the Great Recession, and we wrote a special report after that Great Recession because I don't think any investor alive should say, or if they do say you should run screaming, that they didn't learn something from that. And, we learned something from it. We wrote about it. We said, here's what you need to know. Here's what you need to think about. And so we've got that special report. If you sign up for our newsletter, we will send that to you. It's at kennedy-financial.com, kennedy-financial.com, and you can go on and do that. But let's talk about, because this kind of goes hand in hand with that special report, gets into the details of it, but positioning your portfolio for the times today, and more importantly, for you, because I think that's what people forget. So, Aaron, talk a little bit about when you're looking at someone's situation, what are you, or someone's investment portfolio, how do you compile it? What are you looking at today? And, what are the factors that go into that? What's the ingredients, so to speak?
Yeah, okay. Well, the very first thing that we do is we come back to what your risk tolerance is. That is the most important thing, because everybody has a threshold of pain that they can withdraw. And if that is, I can only lose 10% or I can only lose 15%, we need to know where that number is, because, once you hit that, you pretty much go comatose with fear, and it's over. You're going to get out and it's going to be ugly. So we have got to look at that and make sure we have you invested. And the second thing is, going back since the beginning of the time, you're going to make the most money in the market, period. And there's guaranteed recessions. And the market, on average, goes up about 70% of the time. So you have a 70% chance when you invest that it's going to be up. And the longer you go up over time, if you invest for 15, 20 years, that percentage of being positive almost gets to 100%. So the longer you stayed invested, even though there was recessions, even though there were downturns, you make money by being invested and taking that risk of going down, because the reward is going up. The risk is going down in the short term, but that's a very small percentage of the time. And what our whole investment theory is, I said it earlier, people get manic at the top. People start going crazy. People start doing the exact opposite of what they're supposed to do. Oh, great, the market's at a 10-year high. Oh, great, the markets are more expensive than any time in history. I should buy them. What? I'm pulling out my hair. So,
yeah, I have a theory behind that. I just tell people to remember shopping and cows.
Yes.
Okay, we understand this in Texas, right? So shopping, you're never going to go to the store and want to pick out the most expensive thing.
I'm going to pay full price for that.
Exactly. You go to the bargain rack, right?
Right.
And then cows, if you own cattle, are you going to sell out at the bottom when prices are horrible? No. Who in their right mind would do that, right? So shopping and cows. That's my theory. Anyway, go ahead.
That's right. That's good. No, that's the way to look at it. And that's the way that we look at it. Mentioned it earlier, we're 10 years into this expansion. Don't know where it's going to be ending or how long this is going to be going. But the more manic the market gets, the more risk we want to take off the table. And I'm not saying that we need to go to CDs or cash or anything like that. If you have a certain return that you need to get all the way through retirement or get your kids through school, whatever that is, we need to stay invested in the market. But why not go from those manic parts of the market and get a little bit more defensive? There's no reason that you can't look at the market and say, okay, we're up, let's take a little bit less risk. We're up again, let's take a little bit less risk. Oh, the market's down, let's add a little bit more risk, because what we're doing is we're selling high and buying low and doing it over and over and over again. And we're putting those odds on our side when we capture the gains.
Right.
And we're not going to cash, not for the most part, unless you're risk dictated. We're just getting defensive. There's a lot of defensive plays out there in the market that, we don't have to be in
the bubble
semiconductors.
Areas.
Yeah, we don't have to be in the most expensive part. Hey, we want to clip some dividends. Why don't we move over to a little bit of utilities right now and just see what happens? Or let's get to some of our other defensive sectors and just see what happens. And then when market's correct, we go back the other way. And it's just discipline.
Or they say offense sells tickets, defense wins games.
There you go.
There you go.
There you go. That's exactly right.
So proud of that.
You know what? That is
for the Ravens.
That is such a great analogy of what the market actually is. And I think another part to this is so important as people. And Aaron, you are our investment portfolio manager. And as life planners, we build that portfolio to fit the client, not the other way around. And I think that's often forgotten, with a lot of people out there. They build this portfolio, but it doesn't match their situation. They have current needs maybe for income. They have current needs for their future goals. And, having all of that set up so that if we do go through a recession, that money's there. You don't have to worry about where it's going to come from. That income's there. You don't have to worry if the market went down 40% where your next paycheck's going to come or if you're going to have to go back to work. As long as you are aligning that life planning with that investment portfolio, and that's really
the secret
key.
Sauce.
That's the secret sauce.
That's the secret sauce. Well, no, it's not the secret sauce. But we are at that significant time in history, so we're going to leave you with one final thought because we promise you that secret sauce. And Robert Kiyosaki, which is that Rich Dad, Poor Dad author, he said, to be a successful business owner and investor, because they're very similar. Business owners don't often understand this until they really start to think about it, but you have to be emotionally neutral to winning and losing. Winning and losing are just part of the game. So you have to invest without emotion. And we've been talking about it the entire show, but we cannot tell you how important it is because there's two things that'll kill returns. The Fed, we already know that, and your emotions. And we can't control the Fed, but we can control emotions and get someone to help you do that. Create disciplines, know where things are at so you're sleeping at night. Have that sleep test, and that's so important. So, Aaron, thank you so much for being on the show again today. It's a great show. Great show. 10th anniversary of the Great Recession right here on Life Planning 101. Make sure to tweet us at KFS Life Planning. Are you ready for the next recession?
Thank you for joining us for Life Planning 101, brought to you by Kennedy Financial Services of Eastland. Tune in every Monday morning at 8:30 on KATX and KWBY, and again on Saturday morning at 9 o'clock on KATX and KWBY for more Life Planning 101.
Advisory services offered through Smart Money Group, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Securities offered through Calton & Associates Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC. Kennedy Financial Services Incorporated is an independent of Calton & Associates Incorporated and Smart Money Group, LLC.